Hi everyone, it's Mr. Stewart here with the video for the bouncing ball assignment, and this is the one we're going to do in Maya. So first off, open up Maya and then take a nice big deep sustaining breath because it can be very intimidating. There are so many buttons, so many places to look. It is really kind of a crazy place to visit. And so the one thing I want to tell you is I've worked in Maya for 15 years, and there are parts of Maya I have never opened and never touched. So I'm going to talk to you specifically about the animation parts and the general parts to get around Maya. So everything else I'm going to pretty much ignore, and sometimes I'm going to say don't touch this because I don't want you to get nervous. Okay, so I have up 2015 and 2016. So you can see there's a bit of a difference, especially in the way the buttons look. Generally speaking, there are some differences, but most of the buttons are going to be in the same spot. So the buttons that you need in 2015 are going to be in the same spot as 2016. But if you look, for example, here on the side, this would be the move, the rotate, and the scale tool. And in 2015, they look different, but it's still the move, the rotate, and the scale tool. Okay, to give you a basic understanding of the way Maya works, right now I'm looking in what we call the perspective window. Now, what I'm actually doing is I'm looking through the perspective camera, and this is what I see. So in Maya, we can create as many cameras as we want. Now, you don't always see them, but if I scroll back here, you can see right here, there is a new camera, and this camera is perspective 1, or I'm going to rename it. I can click on it, and I'll call it camera new. Okay, now at any point I can look through camera new. I can hit panels, perspective, and camera new, and now I'm looking through that camera. And I'm going to further illustrate that. If I click on this button here with 4 dots like this, now I am looking through the side, the front, the top, and the perspective all at the same time. And to kind of illustrate that, I'm going to create a cone, and I'm going to scale it to make it a little bit bigger. And you can see that I can see that cone from a multitude of different angles. And if I want to change this to camera new, and there's my camera new that I grabbed. I'm going to scale it a little bigger so you can see. And now as I move it around, you can see that the window is moving and changing because that window is me looking through this camera. But for our purposes, generally we're just going to work in the perspective view. So I can get to the perspective view by clicking this button right here, and that will always take me to the perspective view. But when I animate, I like to have one other window open. And I'm going to scroll up a bit here so you can see this. Right here is, you can see sort of a diamond above a little wavy line. And I'm going to click that, and now I have this window down here, which isn't a camera, it's what's called the graph editor, and it's very important for animating. And we'll get to that a little bit later. But it's something that you're going to want to use. Now, another big important part of Maya is you can see these numbers down here, and this is my timeline. So these are my frames. So right now I'm on frame 1, but I can move ahead to frame 45. I have 120 frames. You can see this bar right here is 120 frames, and if I want to click on the end and shrink it, I can to 80 frames. And I can enter in numbers to adjust my timeline as well. Now at any point I can go back and forth between windows by quickly hitting the spacebar. So if I hit the spacebar and I have my mouse over the window I want to go to, it will take me to that window. And if I hit it again, it will take me back to the set that I'm in. So now if I want to go to just the graph editor, I can click my spacebar and I can always go back and forth. Now if I hold my spacebar down, it's going to create a bunch of menu sets, and this is one of those places I'm going to say right now, don't worry about this. You'll see it flash, it's okay, it's supposed to, but don't worry about it. And when I'm in my perspective window, you can see I can move around, I can circle around, and basically I'm moving my camera in a number of different ways. So it's called toggling or panning or scrolling. So if I hold the Alt key down and I hold my left mouse button down, then I can toggle around. If I hold my Alt button down and my Shift button down and my middle mouse button down, then I can move back and forth. And if I hold my Alt button down and my Shift button down and my left button and my middle mouse button, then I can zoom in. By moving my mouse back and forth, I can scroll in. Now, that sounds pretty complicated. It's really something you should probably practice because once you get used to it, it becomes second nature, and it's really helpful to be able to move around and see what you want to see in the perspective window. So what I would say as a good exercise would be to create a piece of geometry like this, and then just try toggling for a little bit. Hold your Alt button down and your left mouse button, and then hold Shift and Alt and just your middle mouse button and move your mouse back and forth, and then use both middle and left mouse button and Shift and Alt and scroll in and out. Now this brings up a good point about a 3-button mouse. It's really important. It's going to make Maya a whole lot easier to use if you have a 3-button mouse. When I say middle mouse button, if you can't find the button in the middle, and sometimes you can use a scroll wheel will double as a middle mouse button. That's what I have. So I have 2 buttons on either side, and then I have a scroll wheel in the middle, but I can hold it down and click it and use it as my middle mouse button. But if you don't have that, I can show you how to toggle and scroll and pan without a middle mouse button. Now in 2016 by default, when I opened it up, I did not have what these tabs are, what these are called shelves. And I didn't have the general shelf loaded. And that's the shelf you're going to need in order to do this without a middle mouse button. So what you do is you go to this little gear and you click on it and you click on Load Shelf. And that will bring you up to this window. Most likely it will take you right to where you need to be. But if it isn't, then this is where you want to go. You want to go to your hard drive, Program Files, Autodesk, Maya 2016, Scripts, Shelves, and then there will be a whole bunch of different files in here. And the one you're going to want to do and grab is the Shelf General. Now there's this other one that is .res.mel. That one won't work. You want to make sure you just grab shelf_general.mel. And I know this feels a little complicated, but it'll be worth it. So you open that, and then you'll get this general shelf. And this now, you can grab these 3. And so if you click on the tumble tool, this one right here, now all you have to do is hold your mouse button down and tumble around. Or you can do this one, and all you have to do is hold your mouse button down, move your mouse. Or this one, which will zoom in. Now, this can be very, very intimidating. I know that many students in the past have been very intimidated by Maya. And so I would say it's a good idea to maybe take your first time you sit down with Maya and only go this far. When I was learning Maya, and it was the first time and I was introduced to it, this was my first lesson, to create a piece of geometry and toggle around it and learn how to toggle and get used to it. It took me a little bit of time, but really only about 15 or 20 minutes to get comfortable with it. And then it really made the rest of my training much more enjoyable. Now, another tip is the help menu here. If you go to the help menu, you can go to 1-minute startup movies, and it is going to bring you to a web page that's going to have some that's going to have some videos for you to look at. This zoom, pan, and roll, move, rotate, scale, create, and view objects. So many of the things that I went through already are going to be covered here. And you can also go to the Maya Learning channel, and that's going to bring you to a web page, a YouTube page for Autodesk, which makes Maya, and it's going to have lots and lots of videos. I would suggest going to the Getting Started ones if that's what you want to work on, but that will give you much more information as well. Okay, so now that you have gotten comfortable toggling, moving around the perspective window in Maya, now it's time to start the assignment. Now the first thing I want you to do is go up to the left-hand corner, and you're going to see the words modeling, or maybe rendering, or maybe animation. But you'll have a little drop-down menu, and make sure that you are set to animation. So we're going to then leave it there for the rest of the class. I probably won't ever ask you to change that again. So make sure that you change it to animation. Now the assignment is to have a ball bounce 4 times. And you can create obstacles if you want. You can have it bounce fast, bounce high, in any way you want to. But the one thing I would suggest is to not get too crazy right off the bat. So give yourself a little time to get comfortable in Maya and in the animation interface and how that works. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create our ball. So go to Create, Polygon Primitives, and Sphere. And you'll see the sphere create, the ball create down here. And so now there's a number of different things we can do with this ball. We can move it, we can rotate it, and we can scale it. And not only can we do that as a whole, we can do that in individual channels or axes. So if you see down here, you see the y-axis, the x-axis, and the z. So right now I'm set to scale. So if I grab this blue cube, then I'm going to scale it only in z. And this red will be only in x, and the y only, and the green only in y. Now you can see over in what we call the channel box that I have all of those listed out. Translate means move, rotate, and scale. Now if I want to scale all 3 at the same time, I can go and grab this middle button, this middle square, and that will do all 3 uniformly. Now the way I transfer between moving and rotating and scaling, I can use these buttons over here. So if I want to move it, now I have arrows, and I can move individually, or I can grab the square in the middle and I can move it around. And you can see as I move it around, if you look in the channel box, then those values are changing. And then if I want to rotate, I can hit the rotate button, and I can either move it individually, or if I have the right setting, I can move it by grabbing in the middle. Okay, and if I want to enter in values over here in the channel box, I can hit 0 for translate and rotate, and 1 for scale, and it will go back to the original position it was created in, right at the origin. But I need something for the ball to bounce on, so I'm going to create a ground and go to Create, Polygon Primitives, and Plane. And you can see that I have a plane. It's pretty small, so I'm going to hit Scale and make it quite a bit bigger. And now I have my ground, and I want to create a wall for it to bounce into, so I'm going to hit Create, Polygon Primitives, and Cube, and I'm going to move that cube out a ways away, and now I'm going to scale it bigger, but I don't want it to be quite as thick, so I'll scale it in my individual axes, or axes, and move it to where I want it. All right, and now I am ready to animate. Okay, so the way that I'm going to animate, this is when my timeline and my graph editor are going to be very important. So I'm going to open up this again and open up my graph editor. I can have my perspective window and my graph editor open at the same time. I'm going to click on my sphere, on my ball, and the first thing I'm going to do is move it to the place I want to start. So I'm going to move it up to a spot, and I'm going to hit on my keyboard S. And if you watch on my timeline, when I hit S, you'll see a red line appear along with all of these different translate and rotate channels, and on my channel box you'll see that all of the entries turned red. That means I have a key set. Now you'll also see in the graph editor there'll be some dots that have been created. Now anytime I hit F, it will what it will do is frame what I have selected. So that will happen in the perspective view or in the graph editor as well. And you can see I can pan and toggle and zoom in the graph editor as well if I want to get in closer. So each of these dots represents a key and a channel. This one is the translate Y, and I can click on it and just show that. If I want to show all of them, I need to click on the sphere. If I unclick on that, then all of a sudden I won't have anything visible except for what I've actually touched. So you want to make sure that sphere is visible and you can see all of your keys. And now I'm going to go to a different frame, and I'm going to move my ball down. Right now I'm not going to worry about squash and stretch. I'm just going to bring it down to the ground, and you can see I've moved it there, but nothing's happened. I don't have another key. I have to hit S again to create another key. Now that's how the default setting is. Now there is another setting that I prefer called auto key. So I'm going to show you how to use that if you want. So I'm going to go to another frame. I'm going to come over here to this button that has these arrows circling around kind of a plus sign, and I'm going to click it, and you'll see it'll turn blue. And now if I move my button, or I'm sorry, if I move my ball, you can see that I'm all automatically getting keys. Now I prefer that because sometimes I used to forget to hit S, and I would miss my keys, and it would be very frustrating. Okay, now once I've set keys, I can move them around, I can delete them, And I can do that in a number of different ways. So to delete them, the easiest way is to grab them, hold your left button down and pull a box across the keys that you want, and then you can just hit backspace. Now be careful, because if you move your mouse over the perspective window and you hit backspace, you're actually going to delete your whole ball. Now if you do that, it's okay. You can hit Z. You don't even have to hit Control Z, just hit Z, and that is your undo button. Now you can do at least, I think, 20 undos. So you can see I can sort of go back and forth. If I make a mistake, I can hit Z a number of times, and that's going to help me out tremendously. Now I can also move my keys in the graph editor. I can just grab them, and as I move the key around, you see it's actually moving the ball in the graph editor. And if I want to hit Shift and move it, then it will only move it in either the up or down or the left to right direction. It won't move it up and down. So that's another way you can move your keys there. Or I can go to the timeline, and I can do the same things on the timeline. If I put my scene, if I get on the right frame, so I get on my frame that has a key, and I right click, you'll see I have some options. I can go up and delete the key that way, or hit Z if I don't want to do that. And if I want to move it, I can hit Shift and middle mouse, and you'll see that it turns red. And now if I click it with my left button, I can move it around. That gets a little bit more complex. It's usually easier to move them in the graph editor. One of the things to know about Maya and not get too frustrated is there's a lot of different ways to do the same thing in Maya. There's not one right way or one wrong way. Maya is a program that wants to give a lot of people a lot of different options. So if you find one way that works for you, it's absolutely fine if that's the way you do it. Okay, so now I'm ready to start to keep animating. So I'm going to move my ball forward. Now you can see that this is my translate X curve. So you can see that my ball will move forward. I can keep track of this by clicking in my timeline and pulling it across. This is called scrubbing. So I can see what's happening. And then my translate Y, my green curve, is the up and down. Now if I change these curves, then it changes the animation. Now there's some buttons up here. There's different settings for the curves. One of them is, right now, it's in spline. So this button right here will always put them in spline. And you can grab individual keys and put them in different settings. I want to keep the top keys for my bounce in flat, but I want to keep the bottom in what's called linear, because that'll give me kind of a sharp point and give me a little bit better bounce. So now you can see I have a little bit better bounce. It's not as soft. So any of these buttons up here will work well. You're most often going to want to use spline or flat or linear for this assignment. So for that, I'm going to make it flat. Now I'm going to do a few more keys. And again, not going to worry about squash and stretch just yet. I think I want to move my wall over, so I always can. Just click on the wall, move it over. And you can see the wall doesn't have any red here, so there's no keys on it, so it's not going to move. If it does have red on it, then it probably will move. And I'm going to make the bottom there a linear key. And now I'm going to make my ball bounce again. But you know, I kind of want it to bump into this wall a little sooner. So I'm gonna move it. I'm gonna move these keys over a bit. And now I'm gonna set another key up here. Now this brings up a really interesting point into how to use curves to help make better motion. You can see that my translate X curve is now changing direction. And that's because my ball has been moving in one direction in X, and now it's changing direction. But my translate Y curve, it doesn't really look that much different because it's not changing. The up and down is still going up or down based on a bounce. Now, that gets a little bit tricky. You're just going to have to trust me, and I think the more you do animation, the more that will make sense if it doesn't make sense yet. Now, because I want that forward and backward motion to be pretty smooth, I can go in here and I can just go in and adjust these individual curves and try to make it as smooth as I can and as straight as I can. So anytime I want to make things straight, I'm going to hit this line button here, that linear button. And so now I'm going to do one more bounce. And move those keys around, and then have it bounce up one more time. I'm going to make sure I keep that translate X curve pretty straight. Okay, so now I can either scrub again. I see how that's working. Or I can press my play button over here, and you can see, wow, it's playing really fast. That's crazy. So what do I need to do? I need to go to my preferences, and that's this little man with a gear. And there's a ton of stuff here, and I want to make this play at real time. So I go to make sure I'm clicked on time slider, and when it says maximum playback speed, I want to pick real time 24 frames per second. And I can also on playback speed hit real time 24 frames per second. Then I hit save. And now when I play it back, it seems much more reasonable. Now, playing back with the button for simple assignments like this is going to be great. So sometimes the more complex animations you get, it starts to slow down, and you'll want to do something called a play blast. And we'll get to that in just a little bit. Now that I've created my basic animation, I can go back in and layer on top some squash and stretch and maybe refine it a little bit. So I want to go to my key, and before I do that, I want to make sure that I have a key set on every channel on every key. So you can see how on 40 I have a translate X and a translate Y, but I don't have rotate, I don't have scale, and scale is what's I'm going to use for my bouncing squash and stretch, for my bounces. So all I have to do is just go to my frame number and hit S for all of these different keys, and that's going to give me a real stable way to work. So now I'm going to go to my key in the middle here when it hits, and I'm going to create some more squash, or create some squash. And then I'm going to go maybe create a little bit in my X and Z as well. And then I'm going to go to the next bounce and create some in my X and Z as well. And then I'm going to go to the wall here. Maybe create a little bit, maybe not quite as much. And then same thing on this one. And I'm kind of exaggerating it just for effect. But you can see it doesn't really feel, it just kind of squishes and squashes. It doesn't really have much of a sense that it's stretching. It's already squashing before it's hit the ground. So what I want to do is I want to create some breakdowns. So I'm going to go to just frame 6, 2 frames before, and I'm going to hit S and create a key. And the first thing I'm going to do is go to my scale nodes in my channel box, and I'm going to set those all to 1. And then I'm going to give myself some stretch and maybe a little bit of rotation. Now you can see it stretches, and then I can go in and add a little more. And now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Hit S, go in and change everything to 1 on the scale, add a little bit of rotation and stretch. And so now you can see when I play it, I get a much better bounce on that first bounce. So I'm going to do the same thing on all the other bounces. Go to a couple of frames before, hit S, and maybe just immediately go into scaling it, and then scale a little bit on either side as well. Now I'm going to do that for the rest of the bounces. So now, if I want to shorten my time frame, again, I can go here and shorten my timeline. So now you can see I get a little bit more squash and stretch and bounce in my bouncing ball. So now immediately I want to go up here and hit save again. Now since I've already inserted in my name and you can see it up here, all I have to do is hit save and it's immediately going to save a new version of the file. It's just going to save over the top. Okay, and once I have saved, now I want to get my assignment turned in. And this is what I was talking about with play blasting. So to play blast, I go to the timeline, anywhere on the timeline, and I right-click, and I get some options. And Play Blast is right there at the bottom, and I want to go to that square, or that option box, and it's going to bring up this window. Now, these are the settings I want to have. I want to make sure it says from window. For now, that's the easiest. And so I want to make sure that I set in my window how I want it to look. Because however I see it in my window here, is what it's going to look like when I make the movie. I also want to make sure my frame length is the right frame length, and I want to get it all set up. Then I bring up this Play Blast button, and I can move quality up to 100 and scale up to 100. I want to make sure it says from window, and then I want to make it sure it says save to file. And I can browse and put it wherever I want. Most likely it's going to be in that same directory, projects default, but now it will say maybe movies or renders. You can make your own directory, and honestly you can put this anywhere you want to. But for this, I'm going to put bouncing ball, and I'm going to save. Now you can make it as a QT, stands for QuickTime, an AVI, or an image. I would suggest AVI or QuickTime. I'm going to pick an AVI. And then when I hit Play Blast, it's important that I move my mouse button or any other windows out of the way, because it's going to take an image of what it looks like on the screen. It's going to take a picture of what it looks like on the screen. So I'm going to hit Play Blast. It goes through it very quickly and creates this movie file. And now I can go back to that directory. I can go find that directory. If I go into Documents, Maya, Projects, Default, and then I saved it in Movies, and there it is right there. And that's the file that I'm going to upload to my student folder to turn in my assignment. So good luck. If you have any questions, always feel free to email me at chad@theanimcourse.com, and I will see you next week at class.